who the Etruscans were and where they came from. DNA research has finally solved the long-debated mystery of the Etruscan origins. Unlike the Roman Empire, Etruria was not a unified empire. Instead, it was a loose confederation of 12 city-states that shared a common language, culture, and religion. Each city-state had its own government and legal system, and they sometimes waged war on each other, but they also cooperated on matters of mutual interest. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Etruscans is their unique language, utterly distinct from those spoken by their neighbors like the Latins and Celts. Its origins remain shrouded in mystery, with only Radic and Lemnian identified as possible relatives. Together, these languages form the Tyrrhenian family, standing apart from the dominant Indo-European languages that swept across Europe at the time. While linguists can make educated guesses about pronunciation due to the Etruscan alphabet's resemblance to the Greek one, the language's meaning remains largely elusive. This lack of comprehension casts a veil of enigma over many aspects of Etruscan culture, history, and religion, contributing to their enduring image as a civilization shrouded in mystery. Anatolia, a region in modern-day Turkey. This theory, known as the Anatolian origin theory, suggested the Etruscans may have been refugees or even invaders. However, Roman historians offered a different perspective. Observing cultural similarities between the Etruscans and earlier inhabitants of Italy, like the Villanovans, they proposed a theory of autochthony, meaning the Etruscans were native to the land. This theory, known as the indigenous origin theory, suggested the Etruscans developed their unique culture from local roots, building upon the foundation laid by the Villanovans. For a long time, these theories were nothing more than speculation. However, recent breakthroughs in genetics have opened a new window into the past. By analyzing DNA extracted from ancient Etruscan remains, scientists can now peer directly into their genetic makeup. The results have been astonishing. Imagine a bar graph. Etruscan DNA shows a mixture of two main ancestral components. About two-thirds of their ancestry originated from local Italian populations of the Copper Age. This population was formed by a mixture of early European farmers and Western hunter-gatherers and is genetically similar to the famous Iceman Otzi. This finding supports the theory that the Etruscans were indigenous to Italy. The remaining third of their DNA tells a surprising tale. It hints at a connection to the Eurasian steppes, the vast grasslands north of the Black Sea. This steppe ancestry is linked to the spread of Indo-European languages across Europe. This suggests a possible migration or cultural exchange that brought these influences to the Etruscans. But hold on, there's another twist. Despite speaking entirely different languages, the Etruscans and their Latin neighbors shared striking genetic similarities. This tells us that language and genetics don't always go hand in hand. This is particularly evident when examining their Y chromosomal haplogroups, which trace paternal ancestry. Etruscan males carried a predominance of haplogroup R1b, which is typically associated with Indo-Europeans. This is intriguing because the Etruscans themselves spoke a non-Indo-European language. Theories abound regarding how they maintained their unique language. One possibility is that the Etruscans adopted the cultural and linguistic practices of an earlier Italian population while incorporating steppe ancestry.
Next, it was that same force which gave humans very unique tools, which we used to climb the food chain, such as opposable thumbs, sweating, and larger brains. Then suddenly the ability to make complex sounds, and more importantly, the acute sensitivity to comprehend speech, ushered in the development of languages, which allowed us to pass knowledge at a speed that dramatically surpassed evolution. Languages to this day remain an essential part of our everyday life, as they help us communicate, express ourselves, and define our identity. Over the years, thousands of languages have gone extinct, and yet there are still over 7,100 of them, divided into 442 families. The largest among them, spoken by 3.2 billion people, or 46% of the world's population, is the Indo-European language family. The story begins with the incredibly influential Yamnaya culture at around 4000 BC in the Pontic steppe of modern-day Ukraine. Its people were semi-nomadic pastoralists who domesticated cattle, dogs, and above all, horses. This is where the oldest discovered wheels were uncovered, as well as burial sites that show one of the earliest forms of ownership. Compared to the widespread communal tombs we find in most societies, the Yamnaya burial pits belonged to clans, families, or even individuals, sometimes buried with entire wagons. Combined with the fact that they were one of the first Bronze Age cultures, this allowed the Yamnaya to spread across Eurasia on their horses. This expansion was swift and aggressive. Rather than developing their own colonies, they interbred with the local Neolithic cultures, spreading their genes as well as their Proto-Indo-European language. In time, the speakers of this language became isolated from each other, and regional dialects developed into their own daughter languages, a process that continues to this day. Using the comparative method, linguists and archaeologists were able to reconstruct the original ancestor vocabulary, despite the fact that it was never written down. In fact, the words for writing, sea, and iron are vastly different across the many Indo-European languages, since those concepts arose after the original migration. However, the words that were commonly used by the Yamnaya people were nearly identical across Latin, Germanic, Ancient Greek, Hittite, Slavonic, Avestan, and Sanskrit. On your screen you can see how the cognate words for family remained mostly the same across Indo-European sister languages, including words for family members, mother, father, brother, sister. This is also the case for various verbs describing actions that were fundamental to the lifestyle of the Yamnaya people, like sew, cloth, eat, drink, carry, give, die. The same can be said about various objects, animals, and particularly the word wine, among them tooth, bone, eye, night, god, water, fire, tree, new, young, pig, sheep, beaver, honey, brew, wine. One of the very first things we learn in a new language are the pronouns and basic numbers, and yet again we see that both are shared throughout the various different cultures. I, you, we, as well as the numbers from 1 to 10. Languages and pronunciations changed as they grew apart and interacted with each other, as well as other languages outside the Indo-European family, adding and exporting loanwords, but the writing that these various cultures developed hints at their shared origin. The comparisons between the Greek god Zeus and Roman god Jupiter are often discussed, but in reality, both of these gods are adaptations of the original Yamnaya god Perkwinos, the striker, a concept also shared in Hittite culture as Tahuna, in the Thracian tribes as Xibaltheridos, while Dacian tribes knew him as Gebelizis. Albanian culture groups knew him as Perendi. Baltic mythology has Perkunas, Slavic people know him as Perun, Celtic tribes as Taranis, while the Norse people split the singular concept into Thor and Odin. Anglo-Saxon mythology knew him as Thunor, and Hindu people initially believed that Indra was the king of heaven and thunder. Additionally, the very concept of an overarching conflict between rain and the sun, water and fire, man versus beast, most likely arose from the Proto-Indo-European legends. While it is easier to imagine the various subgroups of the Proto-Indo-Europeans as separate branches, it is more accurate to view them as waves that constantly moved and interacted with each other and others. That being said, the first major branch we will look at is Italic, a language that spread alongside Celtic until the Alps split the two around 1500 BC. By 300 BC, the language was fighting for its survival against its Celtic, Illyrian and Greek neighbours, who dominated the north and even eliminated the Sicel branch in Sicily, with only Fascilian, Umbrian, Oscan and Venetic remaining. and then suddenly the Roman Republic rose from obscurity and spread the Latin language across the Mediterranean and Western Europe like wildfire, obliterating all other Italic and most of the Celtic languages in the process. The Latin language itself had two variants: Classical Latin, which was the formal language, and Vulgar Latin, which Cicero describes as the speech of the masses. A standardized and universal language in the empire, one that brought status and economic opportunity, was one of the tools that allowed the Romans to establish themselves as a military and cultural powerhouse. However, due to the size of the empire, many regions began developing a distinct dialect, unique to the province, and when Rome fell, those dialects evolved into their own languages, ushering in the dawn of the Romance languages. The subdivisions of Romance include the now extinct British, Pannonian, and African Romance languages, Sardinian, which is an incredibly conservative language, Romanian, and finally one of the most dominant subdivisions, Western Romance, featuring Italian, French, Spanish, and Portuguese. To simplify what could be its own video, each of these languages underwent significant changes throughout the Middle Ages, as various feudal states and dynasties struggled for power internally and externally. This resulted in dozens of dialects within each language, but if we draw a line between any 2 points between these countries, the further you go, the harder it is to understand the local language.
Here's a heat map visualizing the genetic similarity between Etruscans and modern populations. Genetic similarity is represented by color, with darker red indicating higher similarity. As you can see, Central Italians, Northern Italians, Spaniards, and Corsicans share the highest genetic similarity with the Etruscans. We see Etruscan influence in everything from Roman religion, with its emphasis on elaborate rituals and soothsaying, to architectural styles like the use of arches and vaults. In conclusion, genetic research is rewriting the story of the Etruscans. They were not newcomers from a foreign land, but a complex and vibrant people with deep roots in Italy. Their legacy continues to inspire us today, reminding us of the rich tapestry of cultures that shaped the ancient world.
Az ősi kapocs, ugye, a magyar etruszk nyelvrokonságról. Professzor úr, mire alapozza ezt a felvetést?
My theory has started from the observation that the origins of the Etruscan civilization
az etruszk civilizáció eredete
have always been found in the Carpathian
mindig a Kárpát-medencére nyúlt vissza.
This influence of the Carpathian Basin into Italy before the Etruscans came,
az mielőtt még az etruszkok jöttek volna, már a 3. évezredre datálható.
It grows in the second millennium,
a 2. évezredben ez folytatódott, és egészen a villanovai kultúrában fellelhető Olaszországban. Minden régész tisztában van azzal, hogy az etruszk civilizáció a Kárpát-medencében találja meg gyökereit. De azt soha nem voltak képesek felhasználni ezt az ötletet arra, hiszen az etruszkokat mindig őshonosoknak tekintették Olaszországban. És a latinok voltak tulajdonképpen a behatolók, bevándorlók.